morning, everybody, and welcome to our Coffee at 10 in the Rotunda. Oh, as always, I know this is like a broken record, but it's always good when we can do things in person. But it's also nice that we can have you from all over the state or Nancy just down the street, but that's okay. So today we got an email from Joe, and we love collaborations, and of course collaborations became so valuable during COVID, and I'm glad that this is one of the things that we can carry on as we go forward. So before I introduce our Coffee at 10, I want to just quickly say a few things that are going on in Traverse City. If you are in the area, a week from tomorrow, July 31st, we have the Outdoor Art Fair at the Civic Center. So come on over, it's going to be a lot of fun, and I have been promised by many people the weather is going to be fantastic, so you must come. And then we start our Paint Grand Traverse Plein Air event. That's going to start on August 9th. It'll go through the 15th. It's going to be a fabulous lineup of things that you can do all week long, watching a demo, watching the artist paint, participating in the quick paint, and then of course you want to get your tickets for the gala, and that's going to be Saturday. So to get all that information, artist bios, and you can get a little glimpse of the different artists that'll be participating, go to paintgrandtraverse.com. Thank you. That was a little shout out from Megan. She's up in the swanky loft office. So with that, I'm going to introduce Joe Byer and Jeff Smith from Groundworks and Parallel 45. And I want you guys to talk a little bit about what's going on with your organizations before you introduce Edward.
Sure. Good morning.
Okay. Good morning.
Thank you so much. So I'm Joe, and this is Jeff. And I'm so happy that Jeff came out because when I thought of who we might be able to have this little talk with, I wanted it to be the right kind of partner with the same values. And so I thought immediately of the Groundwork Center that does amazing work here locally to advocate for sustainability and environmental issues that we all care about. And at Parallel 45 Theater, we're in the performing arts business. And I had the pleasure of meeting today's guest at the beginning of our season, which started about 4 weeks ago. And he came to us from New York City, and he delivered a very passionate welcome to our company about his personal belief that we had an opportunity to do more for sustainability in the performing arts. And that really ignited me and got me excited because we don't often hear about that. And so what do you think about this new trend of micro-analysis and sustainability, Jeff?
Well, I think it's phenomenal, and when Joe asked us if we'd co-host, that's exactly what we thought about is, you know, sustainability is at the very center of the idea of resilient communities, which is our name, Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities, so we couldn't say no. But I think what I really loved about it is how it is such a niche topic, and it just exemplifies how we have to think of sustainability throughout our culture in every single way, not just major industrial processes, but our own lives and things like theater. And so I love the kind of who knew aspect of this topic, and I just have a hunch we're all going to really love it. I can't wait to hear about it.
Yeah, I've learned a great deal from Edward, and I'll just briefly say something. So Edward is the scenic designer for both our main stage productions at Parallel 45 Theater. We've got 10 days to go before the end of our season. He's a remarkably talented guy, and I've really been impressed with his creative thinking, and not only in what he does for a living, which is designing for the performing arts, but then outside of it in this sort of passion that he's got for sustainability. And I also, for those of you watching in Michigan, Edward has a very interesting family history with Crystal Lake. I believe it's 4 generations? Five generations who come up here to enjoy all that Northern Michigan has to offer. So without further ado, shall we jump in? Yeah. Thank you, Edward Morris, for doing this.
Thank you very much, Joe and Jeff and Christy for that introduction. I'm not sure where I'm supposed to look. Ah, there's the camera. Hi, I'm Edward. And I'm primarily here, I guess, as Joe said, yeah, I'm a 5th generation Lakey or cottager up here up north, and my relationship with Grand Traverse and Benzie County are why I am so passionate about sustainability and preserving the amazing resources we have here up north. And yeah, by profession, I'm a theatrical set designer and projection designer. And so what that means, how that traditionally works is I work at a studio in New York City, and I make drawings on a big piece of paper, or more these days, a big computer screen. And I send it off to a theater, they make things. I show up for like the 10 days before a show opens. I make sure that the actors interact with everything correctly. And the show opens and I go away. And that is a very, it is a really fun way to make a living. It's not particularly remunerative. It does not make a lot of money, but it is fun. But it has, it increasingly over the years has worn on me the sort of make and waste aspect of that so much of what we do is both the beauty, the asset and liability of the performing arts is that it is ephemeral. And so I think that it's important for artists and theater artists to think about using less and to help preserve, keep places, like I said, like Grand Traverse County, Leelanau County, Benzie County, beautiful by preserving materials, making the most of what we have already. And I think that theater artists are uniquely able to do that because inherently they think creatively. So what I put together with 3 other co-authors is something called the Sustainable Production Toolkit. And it is there somewhere in the Zoom chat. Eventually all these links will populate, but it is a free resource that's available online. It is a standalone website with some resources, and then it is a link to a now, I think, 110 or 12 page PDF, essentially a book that is a step-by-step guide for performing arts organizations to operate more sustainably. I should say, although, as Jeff said, like, this is a niche topic, but I'm super curious with any of the audience here if they might get something out of this that they might be able to incorporate in their own practice, or in the questions that they want to ask organizations that they support, whether they be arts organizations or just any other place that they have to do business with. So I'm going to get general in talking about why the theater business should be more sustainable. I'm then going to hopefully speed through a lot of very specific minutiae, is that the right word? On topics that will really only be relevant to theater professionals. Then I'd like to talk a little bit about what we're doing with Parallel 45, and then also working with another outdoor theater to work more sustainably. And then I'd really love to hear from all of you, if there's a way via Zoom or Facebook Live, or the people here, if they have any questions, and like I said, particularly about what might be able to be used elsewhere. So I'm gonna, as I said, this is something like a 120 page document, so I gotta sort of speed through here. This is just to say that this is a living document. You know, the 3 other co-authors and I should talk about them. Sandra Goldmark is a professor at Barnard College in New York City. She is also their, I'm going to say czar, I'm sure that's not the word, but she's the sustainability czar, I think, for all of Barnard. Her husband, Michael Banta, is the production manager for Barnard College, also a member of Local 1, which is the largest, most powerful stagehands union in the country. And the other co-author is Lauren Gaston, who's a costume designer working in both theater, TV, and film. And we are all now calling ourselves sustainability advocates. If for no other reason that there really are no other people doing it in the performing arts right now, which is kind of shocking, but also true. So you can see here, the document has chapters for all of the different parts of a theater, from what I'm a specialist in, which is scenery and props, but also costumes, lighting, also dealing with designers and freelancers, dealing with stage and company management. So that's dealing with the transportation and the management of the actors on the stage. A section on travel, a section on all the different measurement tools that are out there in the world, and I'll talk a little bit about that. The only way to get better at something is to like find out exactly where you are. So that's why we have a whole section devoted to all the different ways of measuring your sort of carbon footprint. And then a section I'll spend a little bit more time on, because it's more for a general audience, is some general case studies on what theaters are doing a great job at this, and what we have to lose if we all don't do a better job at this. Great. So, I love this quote here by wonderful playwright August Wilson. "We can make a difference. Artists, playwrights, actors, we can be the spearhead of a movement to reignite and reunite our people's positive energy for a political and social change that is reflective of our spiritual truths rather than economic fallacies. What we do now becomes history by which our grandchildren will judge us." So I don't think he was talking about sustainability when he wrote this, August Wilson. But I think it is very applicable to where we are as a society right now. And I mean, if you look at the trends, thankfully we are moving more and more towards electric vehicles, and trying to use more renewable sources of energy. And so the theater needs to, and the performing arts in general, need to keep pace with that. Many of us know, starting last year, there has been a renewed desire for racial justice in this country, spurred by the death of George Floyd, brought to light something that is no surprise to much of America, but it did bring to light to a broader population the need for racial and economic justice. And we see that as totally inextricable from environmental justice. As of 2016, more than 90% of air polluted related deaths occurred in low and middle income countries. In the United States, Black Americans have a 54% higher health burden compared to the overall population. This often has to do with where those communities have been basically forced into because of redlining. My personal journey towards sustainability in the theater had to do with when I worked on a play that was about indigenous communities in Louisiana. Indigenous Native American communities have very often been relocated into very low-lying wetlands, which are much more susceptible to climate change, and also to oil and gas companies cutting canals through them, which leads to erosion and societal community displacement. So to address those issues, we also need to address climate change in our thinking. I don't need to tell anyone in the audience here that we are also dealing with COVID-19. Theater makers are also engaged in much needed reckoning with systemic racism. And alongside the global pandemic, the legacy of white supremacy looms, alongside the global pandemic and the legacy of white supremacy looms another disabling reality, which is climate change. These three crises are not a coincidence. They are deeply interconnected. Their confluence at this moment demands that we re-examine our business as usual and embrace new responsibilities and opportunities as we look forward. So my group at the Sustainable Production Toolkit, we look at sustainability not just for the environment, but also in the social element and the economic element. We think that by working more sustainably, we can make choices that are better for the humans who are making the art, not just the environment that they're contributing to. I'm going to sort of skip here. There are lots of wonderful resources online about the 101 of climate change. And they are, again, they're available in the toolkit, but I'm not going to belabor that a great deal. And I want to pause here to say that one of our main clients that we've dealt with the Sustainable Production Toolkit was Baylor University in Texas. And they do not come at all from a political or an ideological standpoint towards sustainability. They're a Christian university and they look at sustainability purely as caring for God's kingdom. So they say out of any conversations having to do with climate change or changing climate, it is all just about being a steward for what they see as God's planet. And, you know, I'll take it. I think that any reason to care for the land around you is a good reason, and we were really happy to partner with them and work with them on their sustainability plan. I'm going to keep an eye on the time. Are there any questions that have sort of come in on the chat? Just
I have been asking, and we don't have any questions.
that's fine. Okay. There's a lot of material. I want to make sure I'm keeping the right pace and leaving enough chance for any questions and comments as we go. So, what does theater have to do with the climate crisis? So, as theater makers, we're storytellers, we're creative problem solvers, and theater makers are able to engender empathy, build resilience, and empower audiences and colleagues to act on urgent matters. I think we've seen this a lot in the popularity of, for example, a play called The Laramie Project that was about a hate crime in Wyoming in 1998. That was then produced in many communities, including very rural communities across the country. It is part of the reason why I went into the theater, because I enjoyed hearing audiences' reactions to that play. And so theater and the performing arts in general really speak to our hearts, and that's why it's important for us to talk about climate change and what we can do in every aspect of our lives to work more sustainably. Oh, there's also here about the theater is a large business. When you open that to larger entertainment, a very large business, when you think of like stadium shows, performing arts, you know, that annual production of the Nutcracker at, that you go to the local ballet, you know, they have a very large energy footprint, they have a large physical footprint. And so that's why it's important for theaters to work more sustainably. Creativity is the most abundant and renewable resource on the planet. I've done teaching at different universities on design, and we often talk about like the constraints being like the box, the three-dimensional size of the theater or the budget actually adding to the creativity options. And so I like to think of, you know, the climate crisis as being like the largest creative constraint. And so what can we do? How can that inspire creativity in all of us when we're dealing sort of the largest constraint that is, you know, this little globe that we call home. So at Barnard College, as I said, two of the co-authors of the toolkit, Sandra Goldmark and Michael Banta, work at Barnard College, and they did a study in 2016, 2017, and they did an assessment of the carbon footprint of one production. And what we have little here is, I love this little graphic. So what you can't see at home, it says, if they used all used materials to make their show, the production would equal the emissions of 1.5 households, the average American home per month. When they used all new materials down here, they had the average emissions of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 household emissions when they built everything specifically from scratch. So that gives you an idea of, you know, obviously in COVID, there are not that many productions, but in an average year, you know, you look at every high school, every community theater, every commercial theater, every roadhouse that gets Hamilton coming through, all of these houses, you know, multiplied by thousands is the amount of emissions that each of those productions generates. I'm going to, for the purposes of time, skip right to here, which is in terms of framing the conversation, making the case for organizations. We like to think about these things. So mission, looking at the organization's mission statement. I would say like one of my main personal goals is, you know, a year after theaters have recovered from the pandemic, you know, I want to see, or 3 years, let's say, I want to see every theater in the United States have a nod, a statement, something that say they're going to track their environmental impact on their website, and that they will then benchmark that and then learn how to do better in subsequent years. And that boils down to the mission statement and talking about the community, not just like the environment that supports the local community of theater. Most mission statements for theater say, you know, delight and enlighten audiences around. So I would like them to also think about the environment that supports that audience. Align your mission to the human, environmental, and financial sustainability goals. Identify potential champions or sustainability stewards within your organization. Oh, dear me, I went too quickly. This is something that we got largely from the Broadway Green Alliance, which is a wonderful organization. There'll be a link eventually in the chat, I think. They work with commercial theaters in New York and with touring companies. They do a lot of wonderful initiatives. They got all of Broadway to switch to LED lighting on their marquee lights. They got all of Broadway to switch from disposable to recyclable batteries. And they have a wonderful thing, which is a Broadway green, they have college Broadway green champions that are sort of the student at different universities who is in charge of sustainability efforts there. And also when Broadway is up and running, which it's sort of just starting to do now again after the pandemic, they have someone at each theater. They try and get one person who is in charge of championing efforts at that Broadway house to do that. Include many diverse voices in the process of setting priorities and goals, even people who seem peripherally impacted. A big problem in the environmental movement is that most people look exactly like me who are working in it. And we have a great deal that we can learn from Indigenous communities and the communities that are most impacted by it. So I would say this is certainly something that it's important to know what you're doing well and what you are doing well at, and that's something that we currently are not doing great at. And I think theaters, as they are looking to include more diverse voices in their programming, they should also look at it in terms of their mission statements and the communities that they reach out to. And the last thing I'll say about this, sort of like from top down, is make a clear plan to achieve your goals. You know, a statement alone is empty if it doesn't have action steps behind it. Another thing that I really think is really important is a lot of people get really overwhelmed when they're talking about sustainability, and they just think, what sort of impact can I have? And I think it's okay to start small. So you can think big as an organization, identify a few strategies that will have real impact, that touch on your mission, that address big sources of emissions. But it is okay to start small. So pilot programs, to test ideas, collect data, generate enthusiasm, to de-risk an idea. I would say so much of what my work is, for example, I'm always picked out to be an audience participant when I attend a theater production. And that's because I look like I'm not gonna make waves. You know, I look like I'm not gonna go on a political tirade when I get out there. And so I think also a big part of my mission is to like make environmentalism and sustainability just seem not scary, to just really like ease people into the idea of it. So it is okay to start small, to start with one or two projects that are manageable, but connected to the bigger big picture mission-based ideas you've identified. You know, one person recycling or composting might not make a big difference, but when millions of people are inspired to do it, millions of people make a very, very small change. You know, 40%, like something different, something like 40% of the food that is bought in this country is thrown away. So, you know, if all Americans were just a little bit better, just the tiniest bit better at composting or at making smarter choices at the grocery store, we would end all food insecurity in this country if all Americans made just a small change to their relationship with purchasing food, for example. Great, so I'm gonna pause just in case there have been any questions or comments, or from anyone here, if there's any questions or comments. I'm now gonna get a little bit more specific. I'm gonna touch on like some department by departments of some theater specific things that different departments of theaters can do before I'm going to go a little bit broader towards some case studies. I just want to pause to see if there's any questions or comments.
So I have a question, and
Yeah.
oh, hold on, Liz just said, can you please tell them thank you for reminding us that little changes make a difference. So thank you, Liz. High schools, have you ever thought about bringing this down to high school theater programs? And, you know, I was about let's get them while we're young.
Exactly, and
maybe that's where you're gonna go into next, but that's what I was thinking.
no, it is not. And to tell you the truth, our focus has mostly been on college, so getting them while they're in college and at the small regional theater level. And I think that that's a fantastic idea from whoever suggested that online. And we should make I should develop a more pared down presentation that actually does go through a little bit more the climate change 101. And that is, I also have a totally different presentation that I give just to design students that is just really sexy, sustainable designs. But it is, I should make something that has more splashy visuals that is more targeted towards high school students, and that's a wonderful idea. So thank you for that. Yeah.
What kind of reaction have you gotten so far from your?
Right. Well, our industry is in a bunker right now, just trying to survive. We've gotten lots of goodwill. And as I said, so although this is a free resource, we have been doing some consulting. So I've certainly lectured at a number of universities on this topic, which is great that we're reaching students at that level. But we've gotten relatively little interest from theaters who are just right now trying to figure out how they can start producing again. I do think probably in 3 years or so, I mean, hopefully sooner, but we get a lot of interest from folks, but there's not, yeah, I think we are making progress, but not all the way towards normalizing sustainability yet. It is a long road to go up. I think a lot of theaters have to get open first and get some butts back in seats before they can start making huge changes. But then again, we also see this as a real opportunity. There are theaters, and we have gotten this out too, that have kept their production managers, that's the person who handles all the backstage things. And this has been a time where they can work on, for example, sourcing, which is the next topic I am going to go into. I wish I had a better answer to that question.
Well, I think it's encouraging. It sounds like you have a real kind of understanding that it's going to take a long vision to do
that. Yeah, it is a little bit of a long run, also because some of, I've been, in my personal practice, I've always, for the last 5 years or so, I've always had one fully sustainable production, and I've tried to incorporate sustainability practices into others. And it is a long, hard road, but we do think that it's worth it. Thankfully, 2 of the people on the team, they're lucky to have institutional support. But the others who are doing this work are mostly just doing it out of our belief in the mission and that it's worth it. I mean, I will say, just going off that question, it's so interesting because we've built a lot of bridges wonderfully with people doing this in other countries. So there are groups in France that are working on sustainability. In the UK especially, they largely took our free online resource and they retooled it specifically for the UK audience, which is great. We want people to use it. In Canada, just 100 miles or so north, there are whole constellations of organizations working in sustainability in the performing arts. There's French-speaking organizations, English-speaking organizations, and sometimes they talk to each other and sometimes they don't. And it's, but in this country, the United States, there is one employee of the Broadway Green Alliance. Her name is Molly Braverman. She's a wonderful woman. And she is the only person that I know of who is working full-time in sustainability for the performing arts out of 350 million Americans. I think they sometimes have a part-time intern who I believe is compensated. So that's like 1.25 people. 1.5 people, which is, so yeah, it's a long road, but a lot of us are very committed to it. There's lots of other designers working in this way. There's a whole lot of Canadian designers who I cannot name, unfortunately, right now. But on Broadway, there's a woman named Danielle Worrell, who works in this way and has done Broadway shows in this way. And there are many, many costume designers who work in this vein. Yeah, so it is a growing movement. Any other questions?
The only question is if you can repeat questions that are in the audience because they're not picking us up. So I'm lagging here, so now I'm heading to send it.
Oh my
and then my colleague is writing.
Okay.
So
my long and rambling answer was to the question of what reception have you gotten from performing arts organizations? And I'm sorry for rambling a little bit in my answer to that question. So sourcing responsibly. This is something that we talk about in each individual section, but we like to talk about material choices and to source locally. And we have a sample resource guide. So, for example, this is a stage production of Carousel, which it's set in the main town. And I made this set entirely out of 30 outdoor public park benches that were stored for the winter. And so we sort of piled them up. So it's a good idea to shop and build with used materials wherever possible. And if you do have to purchase used materials, human life uses stuff. And so sometimes, and creating art does use stuff. So, but there are ways that you can look at with certifications, for example, with lumber. But you can find out, is something recycled or is it recyclable? Is it toxic? Is it multi-use? And as I said, you can look for third-party certifications such as FSC certified lumber. Do I know what FSC stands for? I do not. But I believe that it means that it is more responsibly harvested. This is a wonderful, I'm sorry to read all the fine print here, but this is just a really good hierarchy when you're thinking about something. And this can be taken outside of theater. Like when you're buying something, you're buying Adirondack chairs, you're up north here. You can buy them out of plastic or you can buy them out of wood, or you could go to the farmer's market in Benzie County on Monday, Thursday, or Saturday mornings, and you could find the guy who makes them out of driftwood. That would be probably the best choice because that's wood that has already been used elsewhere. It was harvested long ago. And that guy is a real hoot when you talk to him. Second choice would be to get one that's made out of wood because although it's new wood, there are sustainable forests. There are ways to do that. Your last choice would be to get the polycarbonate plastic Adirondack chairs. Yes, it might last a little bit longer, but it is the worst. It's made out of petroleum products. So that's an example of how to take this hierarchy of the best things you want to purchase are non-toxic and recyclable, and then you want to look at non-toxic but not recyclable, and then toxic but multi-use. So maybe you do buy something out of plastic because wherever it's at, it will get so much weather that you're absolutely sure it's going to last for 4 generations or something like that. And then the last thing that you want to get is toxic and single use. So foam, vinyl, petroleum products. Another good thing that we can all do, and I said with the guy who sells Adirondack chairs up north, is to support local businesses. Also businesses owned by women or Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Local businesses are great for a number of reasons. You're keeping the money in your community. Also, if you're going and buying stuff off the shelf, you're buying stuff that is, the carbon footprint in getting it to the area, it's baked in, it's sunk already. So you aren't having someone pick something off the shelf at an Amazon warehouse down in Indiana or Ohio, and then putting on a truck that's using fumes to get up here. It's already up here if it's in a local business. So, yeah, hi. We have a question from the audience. Yeah.
I did a set design for a band downstate 6 years, and I'd never done it before. So two of my choices were scrap and hammer because they materials from businesses that
Mhm.
instead of on your right,
Yeah.
5 bags of things to cheap.
Yeah.
Maybe I got, the other one I did was frequently chase through my neighborhood and pick up trash before the garbage truck came.
That's a great idea, yes.
And I like it.
Yeah. So from the audience here, we had a comment about, for lack of a better term, dumpster diving to find materials, which I've certainly done, to see what is like available in the local community before trash comes and picks it up. It's a wonderful source for theater companies for chairs, when people put chairs out on the curb. You know, moving on from there, you know, I've made several sets out of all from Habitat for Humanity reuse stores, which are all over the country and a wonderful resource for things that have been used before. You can also make, during the COVID pause, I think arts organizations can make local resource guides so that they're not immediately going to Amazon, so that they are, I know this is too small to be legible, but it's a list of different organizations. This one is specifically to New York, that we know source things in a sustainable way, and what they specialize in, furniture or costumes or art supplies. If people are not producing a lot at their organization, it's a wonderful time to put together one of those resource guides. So scenery is my personal specialty. What we've found is that reuse is important, but also super important. This is something I'm going to talk more with Joe about at Parallel 45. We were able to do a relatively sustainable production of Sound of Music this year, because for the sole reason that Parallel 45 did a wonderful job at keeping a lot of stock from previous years in their storage unit, which was very wonderful for us. And so what I'm going to talk to them is, as things go back into that storage unit, that it gets tracked really well, that we hopefully devote some labor hours to putting together just a very simple Google Sheet spreadsheet. You know, I'm hoping that Parallel 45 asks me to come back and do their next show, but for any other designer working for them in the future, that they will have access to a list of the platforms that they have, of the flats that they have, of the rough square footage of the astroturf that they have, so that the designer can enter their process knowing what they already have in-house. Proper stock, tracking of stock and the assets that you already have are super important. Also, a great way is to set a target. So when I worked for Barnard College, they've set a target of no more than 50% new materials. So you can still purchase other materials, but they have to be, like I said, from a reuse store or lumber liquidators or something like that. Put a dollar value on stock items so you know what you are saving is very important for theaters. You can also break your materials budget into stock, used, and new materials. This also helps you track how much is new and how much is using that you've already purchased. And then one of the most important things for human sustainability, oh dear, is to reallocate funds from materials towards labor. So working sustainably does not mean spending more money on materials, but it does often mean spending more money on the labor, the time to do it. We're actually here with one of the employees of Crooked Tree Arts' Ellie Dake, who I've worked together several times. I wonder if there's a photo of a set that we worked on together. Perhaps not. But would you like to say just a couple words on when we've worked together, when Ellie and I have worked together, I often specified that we get real branches, real foliage to work on stage. The first thing that theaters think when they see a branch or tree on stage is they think about buying chicken wire and paper mache and bent conduit, and they think about that for good reasons. Maybe you could tell us why theaters sometimes gravitate towards more wasteful practices, but then also when you have worked sustainably, if you could talk a little bit more of that, it means a little bit more of a labor investment.
Absolutely. Well, and I believe
it really depends on your environment, like what resources you have available to you. So maybe you don't have a beautiful forest to go forage in, like we did at Interlaken. So when Edward would ask for those sort of, that was his design, we were able to take a truck and go and hunt for dead tree fall. And though it would take about, depending on the design, we would have to get up to 10 full truckloads to be able to create some of these pieces. For example, a full wall. Trying to think of how long, and like it was probably about 30 feet wide,
30 feet wide, 15 feet tall.
15 feet tall.
Branches.
Yeah, and so and we wanted it to be, substantial. It couldn't, and that's the problem, is it takes a lot of material. Ideally, I think you wanted to not be able to see through it at all, but then it was going to be like a 3-foot thick wall. So we had to compromise a little bit on some sources that we already had in our stock to back it so you could see through it. But you had to find the wood, you have to lay it out, and then you have to attach it, in this case, to chain link fence. And it took probably, and it was myself and 3 other people, it took us probably about a week and a half to do that. And then we had to paint it, and the way you paint something like that is different than how you would paint something flat or even a built tree. It's much easier to make an organic piece of scenery from something that's actually organic material. When you're trying to replicate something with materials, it's difficult and time consuming and expensive. So in a different way, maybe it's not as expensive to do it the labor, it's faster, but to buy those materials to make it look the right way, it can take a lot more money. And those materials are not always really great for the environment. They're usually pretty harmful because it's foam.
So if we were cutting, if we were cutting a wall to look like a whole bunch of tree branches, we would have cut it out of Luan, which is usually Brazilian rainforest wood. And so that's why I advocated that we source it from the environment. Yeah, it was much easier because we're in northern Michigan, for sure. But what Ellie is sort of pointing out, what I see as an opportunity for theaters, they have had, many of them have had to furlough, lay off much of their staff for the last year. And they also have supposedly a renewed commitment towards equity, towards justice, not just racial justice, but like pay equity, pay transparency. And a wonderful way to put your money where your mouth is to hire more laborers at the theater to implement those sets. So you don't change your materials budget, you might even reduce it a little bit, but you make a larger human resource investment, which is what we are hoping to inspire theaters to do. Yeah, well, thank you for talking a little bit. Is there anything else you'd like to say about?
I think it's a great cause, and you can see a lot of waste in theater. I've done it for, gosh, 15 years now, and every time you take down a show, you try and save those materials, but you can only save Luan so many times before it's unusable. And that's the same with plywood and 2x4. Every theater's best interest is trying to save those materials because they can reuse it. It's better for their budgets, or using stock, like Edward was just talking about. But things over time start to wear out. So you really do have to it's an investment. And I think it's if you have the ability to put that in the beginning, it's much better.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ellie. I'm going to, I realize we are fast running out of time. Thank you so much, Ellie. Are there just curious, any other questions coming in? That's okay.
She's reading.
That's fine.
We're good.
Any other questions from here? All right. Costumes. So yeah, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so I don't want to go over. Briefly about costumes, a main thing is to, so much of what we do is fast fashion, and it is just so easy to go and order things. And so again, so much of it has to do just with sourcing and also educating yourself. I love to talk with the wonderful woman who does costumes at the Old Town Playhouse about if we can, they have to order a lot of stuff on Amazon. But I want to see if in the product descriptions, if there are a couple of acronyms of like fabric certifications that I can familiarize her with, so that she can maybe pay $1 or $2 more, but it will be fabric that, was hopefully like made on this continent and not made with, basically slave labor in Bangladesh. I'm going to sort of go quickly here. So going through the toolkit here, we talked about different departments. So I just said one thing about costumes. I'm not going to say a lot about props other than to just reemphasize what I just said. So your most precious resource is your team. Being sustainable can require more labor hours than working wastefully. Budgeting more props, artists, and hours is a clear way to show your company is invested in people, not just a product. Lighting, a lot of it has to do with using LED fixtures. And also just investigating in your area, you can often pay just a little bit more to get your energy from renewable sources, so from wind and from solar. But paying just a little bit more a month, you can make sure that you are supporting those parts of the grid. Also to look at, you know, in the Sustainable Production Toolkit, we come from backstage, but when actually you look at the whole emissions of a theater, a lot of them are coming from the front of house. So this whole third of the graph is what we call front of house. So that's daytime, evening. So that's like air and cooling. So this is where Parallel 45 theater is doing like exceptional, unbelievable work. It's an outdoor theater. They've cut out a third. They've cut out a third. I mean, they, you know, green, you know, gold star, right off the bat. Sorry, for those who you don't know, it's an outdoor theater, so they pay nothing for their heating and cooling. And I'm going to get to, I'm just going to skip projections. I'm going to skip sound. I'm going to skip the side on freelance. I just want to talk a little bit more, take a step back to case studies to just sort of zoom out a little bit. Again, just like measurement tools, and on the toolkit, if anyone is interested, we have links to a lot of them. And they are how you can find out where your organization is at. And that is not just performing arts organizations. We're actually talking with a group about a lot of cities that are tracking their footprint and doing a really great job of that. This is a larger issue in the Western US when they're more prone to floods and to wildfires. They have more of a fire to look at their footprint, and a lot of cities like Denver, Seattle are doing an amazing job at tracking their emissions so that they can do better in the future. And here's a page of all the ways that all the different measurement tools right here. So case studies. So, you know, if we do nothing, we're gonna sort of in the same way that the Alley Theater there in Houston, and they've had catastrophic flooding like every 3 or 5 years in their theater because of the changing climate. Also, theaters out west, Oregon Shakespeare Festival, they have to cancel shows because of heat, because of smoke, as well as because of the pandemic. And you know, it's really tragic for them. Same with Santa Fe Opera, which is a huge draw where they are in Santa Fe. They've had to cancel shows and seasons because of wildfires. In terms of human sustainability, there's a group called the No More 10 Out of 12. You know what? This has to do with minutia about hours at a theater that most people won't understand. But the idea is that the rehearsal process is really unsustainable for people with families and people who have less of a monetary support system. And so it is human, it is more humane to reduce the tech and the rehearsal hours. A positive case study, We Players in San Francisco, I've worked with them to design a production before, but they use beautiful civic architecture to re-examine classics. So this is a wonderful way to activate the community and to have a very low footprint. Again, they're not paying any heating and cooling. There's this artist, A.Y. Young, is founder of Battery Tour, and is one of the first performers to power his concerts using entirely renewable energy. So this is an example of, you know, he reaches a really broad audience by using renewable energy. Case study academia, I've already talked about Barnard College and also Baylor University, we are partners with. And the best example of a large organization, because people ask all the time, it's like, you know, who's, you know, can I look at the Met Opera? No, you can't really. Can I look at the Kennedy Center? Not really right now. But there's the National Theatre in the UK. They have a wonderful environmental policy. It's really easy to read, to really understand what they're tracking. They have a full-time staff person who is devoted to it. They have 3 different pillars than we do at the Toolkit. So they have people, place, and production. But they are really, I point a lot of people to their website. And then case study, a think tank. This is one of the Canadian organizations that we've partnered with, the Center for Sustainable Practice in the Arts. There are lots more resources in here for those of you who are interested, and also to just send it to your local community theater or send it to your high school theater to just get some tips and tricks. I've just touched on a very little of this. I've spoken a little bit to what I'm hoping to do with Parallel 45. We were not as sustainable as I would have liked, but that was really on me, that I should have advocated more, but we did some great things about reusing things. I'm hoping that we're going to close green and find a home for some stuff and to really track our stock with Parallel 45 here in Traverse City. And then to also, they were great for an outdoor theater. Usually there's just thousands of bottles of plastic water backstage, and we didn't do that. A lot of people brought in their own Nalgene's, and there was bottled water. It was needed for an emergency, but it was not used a whole lot, which is great, because big problem with outdoor theaters is like the single-use plastic footprint. So we were able to avoid a lot of that. I also saw that when they did have meet and greets, that at least the plates were compostable, which was really great. So some things that happened here in Traverse City with that company. Yeah, I want to leave a couple of minutes to try and keep this to an hour. If there are any other questions, and it's okay if there aren't, I sort of bombarded you all with information, but any questions from here or from the online?
For me, I got a comment, and that is, I came in here and maybe Ellie and I were talking about set design, but then when you started talking about everything else, I'm like, of course, costumes and lighting, and I wasn't processing all that. So yes, it's a wake up call. Now I'm curious, and I don't know if Liz can hear me. So do you, when you're looking for set designers going forward, you're probably looking for somebody who shares similar values? Because I feel like that's probably a very core element to Parallel 45.
Yeah, I hope I can be heard, but I'll say that Edward very personally has inspired us to take a harder look at our footprint, and this has happened just within the last 6 weeks.
Right.
But I would like to pledge to you that we're going to adopt as many of these ideas as possible, including, I love the idea of transparency. So we'll launch a section that tracks our progress in figuring out what we're doing. And I promise we're going to make that available over next summer. And then I would love for you to, advise us in any way on all the things that we might be able to do, because it is a responsibility, and I feel it that way after you brought it to our attention. So thank you. And thanks to Purgatory for helping us spread the word too.
Well, everyone needs to do, we can each do our own recycling.
Yeah.
Composting.
Yeah, I mean, or just other things like as an audience member, as a patron, if you've been so gracious to stay this long, a very small thing, just, ask the board of your local art center of, Crooked Tree, or of any other sort of organization, like, do you have a sustainability statement? Just when they know that they're bored, when their audience, when their participants are asking that question, it'll get them designing their practices. And another thing is, this is also like really small, but don't take a program, like leave your program in the aisle. I have apps on my phone, I'm an industry professional, so like I have a professional interest in keeping that information for the future. So like, oh, who is that lighting designer? I really like their work of. And so I have an app on my phone that I quickly scan the program, the important pages, and I'll leave it there. So we're not throwing away that glossy paper. Is usually not, it's not as recycled as like newsprint, for example. So there's like 2 very small things that we can all do. And I'm sorry, just for those who couldn't hear Joe, he was just saying that Parallel 45 is going to make a commitment to examine this document and to look at how they can work to stand in the future. And I'm so honored that that he took the time to like look through it and to sit through the Whirlwind tour, and for Cricketry for helping make that possible. And I'm sorry, Jeff.
I'm just wondering if you could share just something from your own work, a project that you worked on where you just thought, I really killed it on that one, on the sustainability. Like what just floats to the top, and what were some of the specifics, you know, your decision making that kind of made it great?
Yeah, I will, I have a number, but I will find the one that I have a photo of in here, because really visuals are much better than words. But I did a production of a play called The Feigned Courtesans. I believe it was one of the case studies in here. And you know, as I said, I have a whole separate lecture that I do just for students to get, or college students to get them excited about this. Sorry there we are. So this is an image of the set of The Feigned Courtesans. So it's set in a city, I think like Florence in the 1600s. And I think it's a very satisfying design with all these gold doors and windows and stuff. And there's a lot of like rushing in and out of people crawling under windows to get through. So it was successful from an aesthetic standpoint. And then it was also very satisfying in that to do it, I reached out to like 6 of the theaters that I worked for in the past year. And I said, do you have drafting of any like doors and windows that you're going to be using in the 2 months leading up to this production? And can you just hold on to it? Just like keep it on your loading dock. And then I got the staff at this theater to then like rent a truck and go around for 2 days and pick up all those windows. And then they also return them after the production. So I think it was successful, not just that it was more sustainable and that I stand by how it looks, like it was a fun design. The director had a lot of fun with it, but I think I also opened up the idea and introduced people to the idea of saving more and working more sustainably, to not just the staff at that theater, but at all the other theaters that I got all the doors and windows from. You know, I did a little bit towards normalizing those choices in the future for them, is what I would hope. So I'm particularly proud of that project. Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions, comments? Well,
all right.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was fantastic.
Okay, well, thank you. I would have liked to ask more questions of the audience, but oh well. Thank you so much.
And yes, so I'm going to end this. So yeah, we're going to end it. And
now this is where it usually keeps rolling, and we say lots of incriminating things.